I'd like to focus today on the sale of Yosef. And this concept of the sale of Yosef, I want to look at a few aspects of it. The pit that he was thrown in, the actions of Yosef, of Yehuda, and how do we look at those actions? And then also, how exactly did the sale take place? Meaning, who is the one who sold him? So let's go back to this to the text here. The text here says, we'll just read these texts a little bit, and then we'll come back and look at these questions. Chapter 37, verse 23. Vayehi kasher Yosef elachiv. When Joseph came to his brothers, vayavshitu es Yosef, es kutanto, es ketonata pasim asher lav. They removed Joseph's tunic. Vayikacheu, and they took it from him. They took him. Vayashlichu oso abora. They threw him into the pit. Vabor reik im bomayim. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. The pit was empty without any water. Vayeshvu le'achol lechem, and they. Well, so why does it mention there was no water? So that's what we're going to take off on. But before we do that, they sat down to eat bread. They saw a name. They lifted up their eyes. And they saw, behold, there was an orchat Yishmaelim, a caravan of Yishmaelim, Ba'ami Gilad, coming from Gilad. Ugmalehem nosim nichot utsri velot. And the camels were carrying spices and balsam and other types of spices. Holchim lohorid mitzrayma, and they were way down to bring it to Egypt. Vayomer Yehuda el Achav, and Judah says to his brothers, Ma betza ki naroges achinu. What do we gain out of killing our brother? V'chisino estamo, and covering up his blood. L'chu v'nimkernu la'yishmaelim. Let's sell him to the Yishmaelim. V'yadenu al tibo, let our hand not be upon him. Ki achinu bisarenuhu, because he is our brother, our flesh. Vayishmeu echav, and his brothers listened to him. Now remember, Judah said to sell him to the Yishmaelim, but the next pasuk says, Vayavru anashim midyanim, socharim, and the midyanim passed by, merchants, Vayimshechu vayalu es Yosef min habor, and they picked him up from the pit. Who's they? Vayimkru es Yosef Yishmaelim, and they sold Joseph to the Yishmaelim. Who sold Joseph? Who sold Joseph to the Yishmaelim? Be'esrim kasef, for 20 pieces of silver. Vayaviu es Yosef mitzrayma. So the text, first of all, there's a couple of questions here. There's just like, how do we understand this text? Meaning to say, the Yishmael were passing by. Why do we care what they were selling? It seems totally irrelevant. And then how do we view Judah's actions, where he says, what do we gain out of killing our brother and covering up his blood? And then he says, go and sell them to the Yishmaelim. And then the next, Judah says, sell them to the Yishmaelim. And the next thing you know, it says that the Midianites passed by. So and then they took him out from the pit and sold him to the Yishmaelim. Well, what does it have to do with the Midianites passing by? Who's the one who picked him out of the pit? So these are some of the classic questions on this text. So now let's go back and deal with them one at a time. First, let's talk about the fact that the brothers threw him into a pit. So it says that they threw him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. So about this, Rashi quotes the Gemara in Shabbos. So rather than reading the Rashi here, let's go to the text of the Gemara in Shabbos, which is Shabbos 22a. Then we'll open up this text in Shabbos 22a, and let's see what we have here. Shabbos 22a, and what do you know? The Gemara in Shabbos 22a tells us the following. Amar Rav Kahana. Now Rav Kahana taught the following. Darash Rav Nasan Bar Minyumi Mishmei de Rav Tanchum. That it was expounded by Rav Nasan Bar Minyumi in the name of Rav Tanchum. What do we do with the fact that it says in our verse, the pit is empty and there is no water in it? If it's empty, the fact that the verse says the pit is empty, that should be enough to teach us that there is no water. So why does it say the pit is empty, there is no water? It's to tell us there's no water in it, but there are snakes and scorpions within it. So that's the text of the Talmud. And about this too, we have a lot of questions. Why? First of all, the first question that jumps out is, what is this text doing in Shabbos 22a? Because the passage before it talks about the fact that about what's the context? It's talking about Hanukkah candles. And the previous passage, the previous line in the Talmud says, does Rav Kahana, he expounded the name of Rav Nasan Bar Minyumi in the name of Rav Tanchum, that a ner shel Hanukkah, that a Hanukkah candle, which was placed higher than 20 amos, is disqualified, like a sukkah and like an alleyway. So the previous sentence is dealing with Hanukkah. That a Hanukkah light that's placed above 20 cubits, which is basically more than 30 feet high, is disqualified. And then you have this statement, and then you have the next statement. It says Rabbah that in Ner Hanukkah it's a mitzvah to place it on the door closest, on the entrance closest to the exit of the house. So we see from here the whole context is Hanukkah, and at first glance you might think that this has nothing to do with Hanukkah, and the only reason why it's mentioned here is because it's the same rabbi teaching it. His name is Rav Kahana, who expounded that Rav Kahana said that Rav Nasan Bar Minyumi taught in the name of Rav Tanchum. But there are those who want to connect it to Hanukkah itself. So the Ramban writes that the reason why this is mentioned here is to talk about the miraculous nature of what occurred in this pit that Joseph was thrown into. So he says, just like the Hanukkah candle that's above 20 amos were way too high to be seen. If you put the Hanukkah lights way too high, you won't see them. Also, the snakes and scorpions were at the bottom of the pit, the bottom of the well, and so therefore the well was empty. There was no water. They couldn't see the snakes and the scorpions. But if the brothers had seen the snakes and the scorpions, then they would have known that a great miracle had happened for Joseph, because there were all these snakes on the bottom of the pit and none of them attacked him. And they would have for sure not have sold him. That's what Nachmanides writes in his commentary to the Torah. That is to tell us this idea that just like a Hanukkah candle, well, he doesn't say that. He says that what the Torah Tamim is going to say, we could read it in a moment, but the Ramban is saying that just like a Hanukkah candle cannot be seen if it's too high, so too the snakes and the scorpions were not seen by the brothers. But if they had seen them, then for sure they would have not have sold Joseph, because they would have realized what a true tzaddik is. And the Ritva proves it, because from the fact that it says that Ruvain said to throw him in to the pit. Remember, what does Ruvain say? It says in the verse, we might have Vayomer Ruvain said to them, Al tishbechu dam, because at first they were saying, let's kill him. But they said, Reuben says, don't kill him. Throw him into this pit. The yad al tishbechu bo, so our hands are not upon him, in order to save him from their hands, to return him to their father. So if he had seen the snakes and the scorpions, then there's no way that if they had known that they were there, there's no way Reuben would have suggested it. So just like a Hanukkah candle that's too high cannot be seen, also the snakes and the scorpions were not seen in the pit. So that's one connection between the Hanukkah candles and this passage of Joseph, that the brothers had no idea, they couldn't see it, but if they had seen it, they would have been aware of the greatness of Joseph. Hold on one second. Here. So there are, however, I have here 5 other answers why there is this connection between these two passages, between the fact that the pit was the story of Joseph being thrown in a pit with snakes and scorpions, and also the idea of a Hanukkah candle that can't be higher than 20 cubits off the ground. So the Torah Tamima, as I hinted to, said that it's just the fact that it's the same name. That it's just the same name. That's what the Torah Tamima writes. Hold on one second. Let me cite this Torah Tamima. The Talmud often cites teachings that are the same name. Hold on one second. Here we go. Torah Tamima writes, okay. So he also writes that the Torah Tamima also says that we learn from another tractate that when it says throwing into a pit, it means at least 20 cubits. And so when it says they threw him in, it means that the pit was itself 20 cubits deep, if not more. And so that's what the context means, that just like we can't see the Hanukkah candles that are higher than 20 cubits, also they couldn't see the snakes and the scorpions. And that's the context. And in addition to that, the Torah Tamima says that we need to say that Joseph was saved from the pit via a miracle, because we have a teaching at the end of Yevamos 121a that somebody who falls into a pit full of snakes and scorpions, we can already testify that he's dead. He's for sure dead. And you can allow his wife to remarry. And so therefore, Joseph would not have been able to be saved through natural means. It's only through this miraculous manner that he was saved. And so that's the point of the Torah Tamima. Meaning to say, so the point is that the brothers did not see this and they were not trying to kill him. So it's a kind of a defense for the brothers. The Pnei Shlomo says, why specifically do we have by the Hanukkah candles the miracle of publicizing the miracle? Why is it specifically a mitzvah of Hanukkah to publicize the miracle? By all other mitzvahs, like for example, matzah, there's no specific miracle about publicizing the miracle of the Exodus from Egypt, but there is a specific miracle there is a specific mitzvah to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. And he says that the reason is that if it was a miracle like the Exodus, the splitting of the sea, for example, that was a miracle that was revealed to the world. And so if it's a miracle that's revealed to the world, there's no reason to publicize it. And so the Exodus, everybody saw the splitting of the sea. And so therefore, the purpose of eating matzah is not to publicize the miracle, but to remind us about the miracle. But by Hanukkah, the miracle was hidden. The miracle of the finding the cruse of oil or the military victory, those were not widely known miracles. They were less known miracles. And so therefore we have to publicize the miracle because nobody knows about the miracle. And so therefore, when Reuven wanted to save Joseph from his brothers and he said, throw him into the pit. And so nobody would have known from that purpose why Reuven had said to throw him into the pit. It would have been maybe to kill Joseph. What do you mean throw him into the pit? So therefore, the verse has to publicize it in order to save him. And so therefore, this is why the two passages are next to each other in the Talmud. Just like the Torah publicized the actions of Reuven and said he intended for good, we also have to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah and to reveal to the world the miracle of Hanukkah. Okay. Okay, now there's the Ksav Sofer says the following, that Reuven in this verse did not rely upon the miracle, did not rely upon a miracle that his brother Joseph would be saved, and therefore he was very anxious to go and save him. And also the Chashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, did not rely upon the miracle and they fought the war. And also in the miracle of the cruse of the oil that was found, there was a little bit of oil, but it just became greater as a result of the miracle. And the proximity of the passages teaches us that we cannot rely upon a miracle. We have to do as much as possible on our own and not relying on a miracle. Much as possible through what's called ishtadlus, through our own efforts. And finally, we have the Maram Shik, and he explains that he quotes the Gemara at the very beginning of Maseches Sukkah, the first page of Tractate Sukkah, that what's the reason that a sukkah that's higher than 20 cubits is disqualified, sukkah higher than 30 feet, is because the eye cannot distinguish what's going on up there. And by the mitzvah of sukkahs, it says that all your generations should know that I caused you to dwell in a sukkah. And that there's a difference between seeing something and knowledge of something. Something that a person sees with his own eyes, even if it's something physical, he believes in it because he sees it. But knowledge, that refers to something spiritual, that only somebody who believes in the spiritual will recognize it. And so therefore, a sukkah that's higher than 20 amos is disqualified because it's not enough to know that the sukkah exists, but you need to see it physically. And also by the Hanukkah candles, we have to strengthen our faith in everyone. And so therefore, you can't put it higher than 20 amos because we need to see it to strengthen our faith. So if that's the case, how could the brothers have sold Joseph to the Yishmaelim after he was saved from the pit? Shouldn't they have seen that a miracle had happened with him? And if that's the case, he was righteous. So how could they have sold him? So you need to say that the brothers did not see the snakes, but they knew that in the pit there were snakes. And since they only knew but they didn't see, this was not such a big miracle. And so therefore, the reason why the two patches are proximity is because the brothers did not see the snakes. And so therefore we have to light the Hanukkah candles to show that if you don't see it, in a manner which you could see it, because if you don't see it, it's not going to be able, the emunah, the faith is not going to be able to become entrenched within us. Okay, hold on, let me pause here. I see that there's a question up, and we'll take that question. Hold on. Baruch Hashem. So the text tells us that after they threw Yosef into the pit, it says, they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes, and behold, they saw the Yishmaelim coming with the spices. There's what to talk about there as well, but for now, I want to focus on the next pasuk. Excuse me. Vayomer Yehuda el Echav. Judah says to his brothers, "Ma'betza ki na'arog es achinu." what do we gain out of killing our brother and covering up his blood? Let's go sell him. What the word betza meaning to say, typically translated as what do we gain? But Rashi says, ma mammon, what financial gain there is. Meaning to say, he's asking what the financial gain was. And that's what the Targum Onkelos, that's how Targum Onkelos translates it. And in this context, we look at the Gemara in Sanhedrin 6b. The context of the Gemara is a discussion about whether or not it's appropriate for a judge to do a compromise, or if the judge should, the expression in legal terms is split the baby, which is like a compromise, or should the judge give a complete ruling? And so in that context, the Talmud says that, and I don't want to get into the full discussion, but we'll start at the top of the discussion. And Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, says, Asur Tzua, you're not allowed to the judges are not allowed to make a compromise, and whoever makes a compromise is a sinner. Basically does mediation, arbitration is sinning. And whoever blesses the one who does this compromise and strengthens him, they're cursing God. And about this it says, Botzea Beirech, one who blesses the Botzea, he's in fact Nietz Hashem, cursing God. Rather, what should the judge do? Yikov Adina Sahar, let the justice pierce through the mountain. As it says, Ki HaMishpat Le'Elokim, judgment is for God. So to Moses said, Yikov Adina Sahar. But Aaron loved peace and pursued peace, and he brought peace between man and his friend. As it says, the Torah of truth was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. With peace and straightforwardness, he walked with me, and he saved many from sin. So then the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer taught, what is the meaning of the verse? Which we have just translated this verse from Psalms chapter 10. One who blesses the compromiser is one who curses God, but they gave a different explanation. What does it mean, Botzea Beirach Nietz Hashem? It doesn't mean one who blesses the compromiser curses God. It refers to the following case. A person stole, let's say, a pound of wheat, and he ground it up and baked it, and he separated the challah from it. How is he going to make a blessing on that bread that he just stole, the stolen bread? And when he makes the bracha, Ein Zeh Mevarach, that's not a blessing. That's a curse. As it says, the one who blesses God is actually cursing God. Hold on one second. Okay, so now we come to the text that we were supposed to be saying. Rabbi Meir says, Lo nemar botzeya ela keneged Yehuda. This verse that says from Psalms chapter 10, verse 3, Botzeya beirech nietz Hashem, the one who blesses the botzeya is actually cursing God. That's actually referring to Judah. Because it says, Vayomer Yehuda el Achav, quotes our verse. Judah says to his brothers, Ma betza ki naroges achinu. What do we gain? What profit is there if we kill our brother? Judah was actually, in this context, trying to be a compromiser. That's what the Yad Ramah says. He was trying to compromise. He was saying, I know that some of you want to kill him, and maybe Reuven wanted to save him. Maybe others there wanted to save him. So let's make a compromise. Let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in the pit and sell him into slavery. So Judah was trying to compromise. And the Talmud has just criticized the compromisers. So therefore, in that context, it says, whoever blesses Judah, Hareze Menait, is really cursing God. Because since his words would have been heard, he should have told them to return to return Judah to his brothers. In some cases, compromise is worse than losing, because at the end of the day, we don't know if they would have gone through and actually killed Joseph. But by compromising and suggesting we sell him, he was giving a solution that was more palatable. And in the end, that's what happened, that Joseph was sold. And about this context, it says, Botzea berech nietz Hashem. One who blesses the compromiser, or one who blesses Judah, is actually cursing God. Hold on, I see the hand up, but let me just read this. Let me just read a commentary to you, and then I'll take the question. You shouldn't say that even though Judah did a sin by causing him to be sold, nevertheless he did a mitzvah, says the Torah Chaim. Don't say he did a mitzvah because he saved them from death, that his brothers didn't kill him, and we should bless him for this. No, don't say that. The verse is telling us that if you bless him, you're cursing God, because this is a mitzvah that came through a sin, because she should have said, or return to his father. Don't bless the guy who who didn't do the full mitzvah, who did a part of the mitzvah. Even though he saved him, he could have really saved him. And why does Jacob say, Miteraf b'ni Alisa, that you rose up from the jaws of an animal? He wasn't praising him that he didn't allow them to kill Joseph, but rather he was praising him for the later actions in Judah's life with Tamar, that he admitted and he wasn't embarrassed to say, I was the one who sinned. So that's what Tosfos says. I can read that for you here. Tosfos says, they weren't Judah. Jacob was not praising Judah for these actions. He was praising him for the later actions with Tamar. Yes, let me just pause here. So, why is it the case? Why is it the case that it says? Why is it the case that one who blesses Yehuda is cursing God? So, why does Rabbi Meir, and more precisely, why does Rabbi Meir not curse Judah? He says, whoever blesses Judah is cursing God. Why doesn't he curse Judah himself? So that's basically the question that the commentaries ask on that. And also, why, if somebody blesses Judah, are they called a cursor of God? So somebody who does that, this description as a cursor of God is really usually applied to somebody who does a terrible sin, like heresy or some other terrible thing. I mean, this is okay. So you say, listen, who in this town especially doesn't compromise? Maybe now they don't, but they used to. That's how deals were done. And you're going to be such a strong opponent of compromising. So the issue is what someone explained. The Yefei Mara explains that it refers to somebody who says that God told Judah to sell Joseph so that Joseph would go down to Egypt and be able to save the world. Because don't say that Judah did this because God put it in his heart, because God would never do something, would never put into the heart of man to do bad. So whoever is saying this fundamentally heretical idea that God told Judah to do this bad action, that's what the person is basically cursing God. So don't say that. That's the one approach of the Yefei Mara. The Maharsha says that Rabbi Eliezer is saying that whoever says Judah saved Joseph from death in order to make money is really cursing God, because according to him, the only reason Judah saved Joseph was not out of fear of God, but because he wanted to make a few extra dollars. And so therefore don't say that. And furthermore, the Maharsha writes that Rabbi Meir's approach is that Rabbi Meir's intent is to curse Judah for the sale of Joseph. When it says Botzei Berech, he says Hamevarech, means to say, he's saying it in a euphemism, meaning to say one who curses Judah for selling Joseph and not bringing him back to his father is really cursing God, because Judah's intent was to serve God. And he said, I'm selling him because he was concerned that the brothers would not listen to him if he'll say they'll return Joseph to his fathers. And so therefore, one who does this is really cursing God. And he further explains that that one who curses Judah is really considered like they're cursing God, because the name of God is found within Judah. One final explanation about this is from the Eon Yaakov, and the Eon Yaakov says that Judah himself was considered like somebody who started a mitzvah, but he didn't finish it. You have to finish the mitzvah. It's not enough to start the mitzvah. And so therefore, that's the reason he says a huge tragedy. But the Eon Yaakov says that for this, Judah was divinely punished, and he had all the terrible tragedy that he later on in his life. And so therefore, one who blesses Judah, it's as though, and he's saying that he fulfilled the mitzvah properly. Then he's basically saying that Judah was not worthy of the divine punishment that God later visited upon him, and so therefore that's like cursing God. Now, I had said earlier the position that Judah was not praising that Jacob was not praising Judah for saving his children, for saving Joseph from the pit, and that's what Bruce alluded to. But I do want to mention there's a sefer called Gushpanka de Malka, which is a commentary on Tosfos. He writes something incredible, that when Jacob gives the blessing to Judah, he's giving it to Judah for the fact that Judah saved Joseph from death. So he is praising Judah. Jacob is praising Judah for saving Joseph from death, and that's okay to praise him, but don't praise him when he says, what gain do we have of killing him? Let's sell him, because that's not worthy to be praised. You can't. The fact that he praised him is worthy, but the phrase that he used is not that you can't praise. So Jacob praised Judah for saving Joseph, but you can't praise Judah for specifically saying those words. What gain do we have? Because that's like it's saying, well, if they would have hired me to kill him, then we would have killed him as well. So those are some of the commentaries on this phrase, on this verse, Botzei Berech Nietz Hashem. And in that context, I just want to look very briefly at one more major discussion in the context of this passage, and that is who in fact sold Joseph. Who in fact sold Joseph. So I want to look at there's a lot of different discussions on this, but I just want to look at briefly the dispute between Rashi and Rashbam. So the Rashi says as follows on chapter 37, verse 28. Again, the text says, Judah says, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim. The caravan of Ishmael was coming. Judah says, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim. Then the caravan of the Midianites passed by, and it says they dragged him and drew up Joseph from the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim. Who sold Joseph? And then it says, so who sold him? It could have been the Midianites, or it could have been the brothers sold him. So Rashi says, when it says the Midianites passed by, Rashi says this was a different caravan from the one mentioned above. There were two caravans. One was the Ishmaelim passing by. They didn't sell him to them. Then the Midianites passed by. And the Midianites, that's what the text is telling us. Rashi says, Shenimkar pa'amim harbe. That the text is telling us that Joseph was sold many times. But later on in chapter 39, it was saying that the Ishmaelites took Joseph down to Egypt. So Rashi says that basically the Midianites bought Joseph, but maybe they then sold him to the Ishmaelites. That's possibly what it means. And it says they pulled him out. Rashi says here specifically, who pulled out Joseph from the pit? The sons of Jacob pulled Joseph from the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelim. And the Ishmaelim sold him to the Midianites, and the Midianites sold him to Egypt. So basically, Rashi says that what happened was the brothers took him out, sold him to the Ishmaelim. That's what Judah says. Here's the Ishmaelim. Let's sell him to him. The Ishmaelim sold him to the Midianites, and the Midianites sold him to Egypt. Which is difficult because it says he saw the Ishmaelim, and then the Midianites passed by, and then it says they pulled him up from the pit, and they sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim. Well, why are the Midianites mentioned at that point if they weren't actually the ones who they sold him to? So it's a little bit of a challenge to that textual reading of Rashi. So want to look at just one other commentary, an alternative comment. Yes, Rabbi Yosef, of course. So Rashbam, who's Rashi's grandson, gives a little bit of a different explanation of the text here. He says, Rashbam says, and then maybe we'll get Sforno briefly. He says, "B'toch shayu yoshvim lachol lechem." The Midianites passed by while the brothers were sitting down to eat their food, and they were a little bit distant from the pit. Why? Because they didn't want to eat next to where their prisoner was, and they were waiting for the Ishmaelites that they saw. And before the Ishmaelim came, the Midianites passed by. Different other Midianites passed by. And they saw him in the pit, and they pulled him out, and the Midianites sold him to the Ishmaelim. And we could say that the brothers didn't know. They never knew. They never knew who actually sold him. Meaning to say, they didn't sell him. They were eating at a distance, and other people passing by saw him and picked him up. The brothers never sold him. And even though it says later on, you sold me to Egypt, meaning to say Joseph was not saying that you actually sold. He was saying your actions caused me to be sold. So those basically Rashbam is saying that the brothers didn't sell him. It was the Midianites who picked him up. And if you want to say, what about the text says in verse 28, they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver. Doesn't that mean that the brothers sold him? You could say no, that they told the Midianites to take him out from the pit, and then the Midianites sold him. I mean, say the brothers were not innocent, but according to Rashbam, they were not directly involved. And that's how Rashbam reads it. The Sforno says they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim. He says the Ishmaelim made the sale on behalf of the Midianites, who were the merchants. Meaning to say they sold it to the Ishmaelim through the Midianite middlemen. And they didn't want to speak directly to the Ishmaelim because they were worried that the people who bought it would recognize them when they were traveling in those cities. And so therefore they spoke with the other people in between to keep their hands clean, so to speak. Okay, hold on. Let's stop here. Bruce has a question. Yes.
This time it's April.